Hey everyone, my name is Jake. I am 26 years old and I am from Brazil. Today, I want to share the story of how I learned English in just 5 months. But before I tell you how I became confident in English, I want to take you back to the moment when I realized that English was the biggest problem in my life. Because my journey did not start with confidence. It did not start with motivation. Clears throat. It started with failure, frustration, and a moment that completely changed the way I looked at English. 5 months ago, I was the person who avoided speaking English. I knew some words. I understood simple sentences. I could read small texts. But when it was time to speak, everything disappeared from my mind. I knew what I wanted to say, but I could not put the words together. It felt like my brain knew English, but my mouth did not know how to use it. Every time someone asked me a question in English, my heart started beating faster. I became nervous. I started thinking too much. I was not focused on the conversation. I was only thinking, what if I make a mistake? What if they laugh at me? What if they think my English is bad? And because of this fear, I stayed quiet. I avoided opportunities. I avoided conversations. I avoided situations where I had to speak English. But one day something happened that opened my eyes. I always had a dream of working with an international company. I worked hard, learned new skills, and improved myself because I wanted a better future. I believed that my talent and hard work would be enough. I thought, if I become good at my job, English will not matter too much. But I was wrong. One day, I got an amazing opportunity. I received an email for an interview with a company from another country. I was extremely happy. I remember looking at that email again and again. I thought about my future. I imagined myself working with talented people from around the world. I imagined new opportunities and a better life. I was excited because I knew I had the skills for that job. I prepared everything. I practiced my technical knowledge. I studied the company. I prepared answers. But there was one thing I did not prepare enough: my English. Then the day of the interview arrived. I opened my laptop, joined the meeting, and saw 3 people waiting for me. They smiled and introduced themselves. At the beginning, everything seemed okay. Then they started asking questions. The first question was simple. Can you tell us about yourself? I knew this answer. I had practiced it many times in my own language. I knew my story. I knew my experience. I knew what I wanted to say. But when I tried to speak English, my mind became empty. I said, my name is Jake. I am my work. I have experience. Then I stopped. I could feel the pressure. I wanted to explain more, but the words were not coming. The interviewer waited patiently, but inside I felt terrible. They asked another question. Again, I understood the question, but I could not give a good answer. I was not failing because I was not smart. I was not failing because I did not have skills. I was failing because I could not communicate. After the interview ended, I sat there quietly. I looked at the screen and felt disappointed. That moment hurt me because I realized something important. English was not just a language. English was a bridge. It connected people. It created opportunities. It gave people the confidence to express their ideas. And I did not have that bridge yet. That day I asked myself a serious question. How many opportunities will I lose if I continue avoiding English? I thought about my future. I thought about my dreams. I knew I could not continue like this. I had two choices. I could keep saying, English is difficult. Maybe I'm not good at languages. Or I could accept the challenge and do something about it. That night I made a decision. I said to myself, I will learn English. I don't know how long it will take, but I will not give up. But then I faced another problem. I had tried learning English before. Like many beginners, I followed methods that did not really help me speak. I memorized hundreds of vocabulary words. I studied grammar rules for hours. I watched lessons and took notes. But after months of studying, when someone spoke to me in English, I still felt nervous. I realized something important. The problem was not that I was not working hard. The problem was that I was learning English in the wrong way. I was studying English like a subject, not practicing English like a skill. Think about it. If you want to learn swimming, you cannot learn only by reading books about swimming. You have to jump into the water. If you want to learn to play an instrument, you cannot become a musician by only watching videos. You have to practice every day. English was the same. I needed to use it. I needed to speak it. I needed to make mistakes and improve. That was the beginning of my 5-month journey. I stopped searching for the perfect method, and I started building a simple daily system that focused on real communication. I started with small steps. I focused on speaking simple sentences. I trained my ears to understand English. I practiced every single day, even when I did not feel motivated. Slowly, something started changing. The person who was afraid of English started becoming comfortable with English. But this was only the beginning. The first 15 days were the most important days of my journey because they built the foundation for everything that came after. And in the next chapter, I will share exactly what I did during those first days that helped me finally start speaking English with confidence. Chapter 2. The first 15 days that changed my English forever. After I made the decision to learn English seriously, I thought the hardest part would be finding the best course or the best teacher. I thought maybe I needed expensive classes, a private tutor, or some special secret method that only fluent people knew. But after trying different things, I discovered something very important. The biggest change did not come from expensive resources. It came from changing the way I practiced. I stopped learning English like a school subject, and I started learning it like a real-life skill. And the first 15 days became the foundation of my entire English journey. In those 15 days, I did not become fluent. I did not suddenly speak like a native speaker, but something much more important happened. I built confidence. I trained my brain. I started believing that I could actually learn English, and that belief changed everything. When most people start learning English, they make the same mistake. They think, I need to learn thousands of words before I can speak. I used to think the same way. I opened vocabulary books and tried to memorize long lists of words. I learned words like beautiful, important, different, and many more. But when I had a real conversation, those words were useless because I did not know how to use them. I knew words, but I could not create sentences. I knew English, but I could not speak English. That was the problem. So, I changed my strategy. Instead of learning random words, I started learning useful sentences. I asked myself a simple question. What sentences do I actually need in my daily life? Then I created a list of simple sentences that I could use in real conversations. For example, how are you? What are you doing? Can you repeat that, please? I don't understand. Can you speak slowly? I am learning English. I need some help. These sentences looked simple, but they were powerful. Why? Because they gave me a starting point. Before, whenever I wanted to speak, I had to create everything from zero. My brain had to search for words, create grammar, and build a sentence. That made me slow and nervous. But when I practiced these common sentences again and again, they became automatic. I did not have to think too much. The words started coming naturally. Every morning I spent time reading these sentences out loud. I did not just read them in my mind. I spoke them. I repeated them many times. At first, it felt strange. My pronunciation was not perfect. My voice sounded different. Sometimes I felt embarrassed, even when I was alone. But I continued because I knew something important. Every fluent speaker was once a beginner. Everyone who speaks English confidently today had to start somewhere. Another powerful habit I started during those first 15 days was talking to myself in English. Many people think talking to yourself is strange, but for me, it became my secret weapon. I realized that I did not need a classroom to practice speaking. I did not need a partner every time. I could create my own English environment. When I woke up in the morning, I described my actions in English. I said, I am getting ready. I am brushing my teeth. I am making breakfast. When I walked outside, I described what I saw. The weather is sunny. There are many people outside. A car is passing by. These sentences were simple, but they trained my brain to think in English. Before this, my brain always worked like this. I thought in my native language, translated into English, and then spoke. That process was slow, but by practicing self-talk, I slowly started creating thoughts directly in English. Another thing that helped me during those days was listening and repeating. I found short English videos, conversations, and interviews. But I did not just watch them like entertainment. I studied them. I listened to one sentence. I paused the video. Then I repeated the sentence exactly like the speaker. I copied their pronunciation, speed, and emotion. If they sounded excited, I tried to sound excited. If they spoke slowly, I copied their rhythm. This method helped me understand how real English sounds. Because the English we learn from books is sometimes different from the English people actually speak in daily life. Real conversations have emotions, different tones, and natural expressions. I wanted to learn that kind of English. During these 15 days, I also started writing simple sentences every night. I wrote about my day. At first, my sentences were very basic. Today I worked. Today I ate food. Today I watched a video. But I did not worry about perfection. My goal was to train my brain to express ideas in English. Slowly, my sentences became longer. I started adding more details. Today, I worked on my project, and after work, I watched an English video. These small improvements gave me confidence. After 15 days, something surprising happened. I noticed that English did not feel as scary as before. I still made mistakes. I still did not know many words. But I was no longer completely stuck. I could introduce myself. I could talk about my daily routine. I could understand simple conversations. Most importantly, I stopped believing that English was impossible. I understood that progress comes from small actions repeated every day. Those first 15 days taught me one of the biggest lessons of my journey. You do not need to wait until you know everything before you start speaking. You start speaking in clear throat. That is how you learn. Every sentence you say builds confidence. Every mistake teaches you something. Every minute you practice moves you closer to fluency. But after those 15 days, I realized something. Knowing simple sentences was only the beginning. I wanted to have real conversations. I wanted to answer questions naturally. I wanted to speak without translating every word in my head. So I created the next part of my system. And this next method was the moment when my English started changing faster than ever before. In the next chapter, I will share the speaking technique that trained my brain to think in English and helped me become more comfortable in real conversations. Chapter 3. The speaking method that made me think in English. After completing my first 15 days of English practice, I felt a small change inside me. I was not the same person who was completely afraid of English. I could say simple sentences. I could introduce myself. I could talk about my daily activities. But I knew something was still missing. I could speak small sentences, but I could not have a real conversation. Whenever someone asked me a question, I still needed time to think. My brain was working too slowly. I knew some English words, but connecting those words together was still difficult. That is when I discovered the biggest problem that almost every English learner faces. The problem was not vocabulary. The problem was thinking in my own language first, and then translating into English. For example, someone would ask me, "What did you do today?" My brain would first create an answer in my native language. Then I would try to translate every single word into English. This process took too much time. Sometimes, by the time I created the sentence, the conversation had already moved forward. I realized that fluent speakers do not speak by translating every word. They think directly in English. So, I needed to train my brain to do the same. That is when I started using a method that completely changed my speaking ability. I called it the question and answer method. The idea was very simple. I would ask myself questions in English and answer them immediately. I did not wait for the perfect sentence. I did not worry too much about mistakes. My goal was to make my brain faster. At the beginning, my answers were very short. I asked myself, "What did you do today?" My answer was, "I worked." That was it. Just 2 words. But then I challenged myself. I asked, "How can I make this answer longer?" So I improved it. I worked on my project. Then I improved it again. I worked on my project for 3 hours. Then again, I worked on my project for 3 hours, and after that, I relaxed at home. Slowly, I trained my brain to create longer and better sentences. This simple exercise helped me more than memorizing hundreds of grammar rules because I was practicing real communication. I was teaching my brain how to respond naturally. I did this every day. I asked myself questions about my life, my thoughts, and my experiences. Questions like, what is your favorite food? What do you want to do in the future? What did you do yesterday? Why are you learning English? These questions were simple, but they helped me talk about real topics. After some time, I noticed something amazing. I was not searching for every word anymore. My brain started creating sentences faster. I was becoming more comfortable. Another important part of my journey was improving my pronunciation. I knew that speaking English was not only about knowing words, it was also about sounding clear and natural. In the beginning, I was afraid that people would not understand my pronunciation. Sometimes I avoided speaking because I thought my accent was a problem. But then I learned something important. Having an accent is not a bad thing. The goal is not to erase your identity. The goal is to speak clearly and confidently. So I started using a technique called shadowing. This technique changed my pronunciation completely. The process was simple. I found short clips of native English speakers from videos, movies, and podcasts. I listened to one sentence. Then I repeated it immediately. I tried to copy everything. The pronunciation, the speed, the emotion, the way they connected words. For example, if someone said, "I don't know what you are talking about," I did not just repeat the words. I copied the whole sound of the sentence. I practiced again and again until it felt natural. At first, it was difficult. My mouth was not used to making those sounds. Sometimes I felt like I sounded funny. But I continued because I knew every repetition was training my speaking muscles. After a few weeks, I noticed that my pronunciation was improving. My sentences sounded smoother. I felt more confident when speaking. Another mistake I stopped making was memorizing vocabulary lists. Before, I thought learning more words would automatically make me fluent. But I realized that words only become powerful when you know how to use them. So, I started learning vocabulary through stories. Every day I chose a few new words and created a small story using them. For example, I learned the words excited, invitation, party, arrive, and surprise. Instead of memorizing the meaning separately, I created a story. I was excited because I received an invitation to a party. When I arrived at the party, I got a big surprise because my friends organized a special celebration for me. This method helped me remember words much easier because my brain connected them with a situation. I also started using English in my daily life. I changed small things around me. I watched English videos. I listened to English conversations. I followed English speakers online. I tried to make English a part of my normal routine instead of something I only studied for 1 hour. Slowly, English became familiar. It was no longer a strange language. It became something I used every day. After some time, I realized one of the biggest changes. I started thinking in English. When I saw something, I automatically thought about it in English. When I wanted to express an idea, English words started coming naturally. It was not perfect, but it was progress, and that was the moment I understood something powerful. Fluency does not happen because you know every word. Fluency happens because you practice using the words you already know. But my journey was still not complete. I could speak more confidently now, but I wanted to understand native speakers better. I wanted to improve my grammar naturally. I wanted to remove the fear that was still inside me. The next stage was the biggest challenge because I had to move from practicing alone to using English in real situations. And that is where my confidence started growing even more. In the next chapter, I will share how I improved my listening, grammar, and confidence, and how I finally started feeling comfortable speaking English with other people. Chapter 4. How I improved my listening, grammar, and confidence. After learning how to think in English and practicing my speaking every day, I finally started feeling some progress. I was no longer completely afraid of English. I could create sentences faster. I could talk about my daily life. I could express simple ideas. But I still had one big problem. I could speak, but sometimes I could not understand other people. When native speakers talked, they spoke quickly. They connected words together. They used expressions that I had never learned in books. Sometimes I knew every single word in a sentence. But when I heard the complete sentence, I still could not understand it. This was frustrating because I realized that communication is not only about speaking, it is also about listening. If you cannot understand what people are saying, it becomes difficult to have a real conversation. So I decided to improve my listening skills. But I did not want to make the same mistake again. I did not want to just watch English videos for hours without learning anything. I wanted to practice actively. I started listening to English every day. I listened to podcasts, interviews, conversations, and simple English videos. But instead of just listening, I followed a special method. I listened carefully. I found short sentences. I paused the audio. I repeated the sentence that I listened again. This helped my ears become familiar with real English. At first, it was difficult. Sometimes, I listened to the same sentence 5 or 10 times because I could not understand it. But slowly, my brain started recognizing patterns. Words that sounded fast before started becoming clear. I learned that listening is like training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. One of the biggest things that helped me was watching English movies and videos in the right way. Before, I watched movies only for entertainment. I heard English, but I did not really learn from it. Then I changed my method. I started watching with attention. When I heard a useful sentence, I paused the video. I wrote it down. I repeated it. I tried to understand why the speaker used that sentence. For example, I heard people say, "What are you up to?" Before, I did not understand why they used this sentence. I thought it was strange. But I learned that it simply means, "What are you doing?" These small discoveries helped me understand natural English. I started learning the English that people actually use in real conversations. Another big challenge for me was grammar. Many English learners spend years studying grammar rules, but they still cannot speak confidently. I had the same problem before. I memorized rules, but when I needed to speak, I forgot everything. So I changed my approach. I stopped trying to memorize every grammar rule. Instead, I learned grammar through examples. I paid attention to how native speakers created sentences. I noticed sentence patterns and practiced them. For example, instead of only learning the rule of the present perfect tense, I focused on sentences like, "I have learned a lot from this experience." "I have been studying English for 5 months." These sentences help me understand how grammar works in real life. I realize that grammar is not something you only study. Grammar is something you build through practice. Another thing that helped me improve was keeping a mistake notebook. Every time I made a mistake, I wrote it down. I did not feel bad about mistakes. I saw them as lessons. For example, sometimes I said, "He go to school." Then I corrected myself. "He goes to school." I practiced the correct sentence many times until it became natural. This small habit helped me improve because I was learning from my own problems. But the biggest challenge was still confidence. Even when my English improved, there was a voice in my head saying, "What if you make a mistake? What if people judge you? What if they don't understand you?" Many learners have this fear. They wait until their English is perfect before they speak. But I learned something important. You do not become confident before speaking. You become confident by speaking. So I forced myself to use English in real situations. I started small. I greeted people in English. I asked simple questions. I had short conversations. Every time I spoke, I became a little less afraid. I realized that most people were not judging me. They were just trying to communicate. In fact, many people respected my effort because they knew learning a new language was not easy. One day I had a conversation with someone in English, and something amazing happened. I was speaking without thinking too much. I was not translating every sentence. I was listening and responding naturally. It was not perfect English, but it was real communication. That moment gave me so much confidence because I realized I was changing. I was becoming the person I wanted to become. I was no longer the person who stayed silent because of fear. I was someone who was willing to try. During this stage, I also created a daily English routine. Every morning, I listened to English for some time. During the day, I tried to think in English. In the evening, I practiced speaking and writing. It was not always easy. Some days I felt tired. Some days I did not want to practice. But I remembered why I started. I remembered that interview where I could not express myself. I remembered how disappointed I felt, and that memory pushed me forward. After several months of consistent practice, I noticed a huge transformation. English was no longer something outside my life. It became part of my daily routine. I was improving because I was using English every final challenge left. The final month would test everything I had learned. I needed to prove to myself that I could truly communicate with confidence. And what happened in that final month became the biggest breakthrough of my entire journey. In the next chapter, I will share how I reached my final transformation and the moment when I realized that all my hard work had finally paid off. Chapter 5. The final month breakthrough and my biggest transformation. After 4 months of practicing English every single day, I started noticing a huge difference in myself. I still remembered the person I was 5 months ago, the person who was afraid to speak, the person who knew some English words but could not create a simple sentence, the person who avoided conversations because of fear. But now things were changing. I was not perfect. I still made mistakes. I still had moments where I searched for the right words. But the biggest difference was that I was no longer afraid. I finally understood something important. Speaking English was not about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to communicate. And that mindset changed everything. When I entered my 5th month, I decided to challenge myself even more. I did not want to only practice alone anymore. I wanted to use English in real situations. I wanted to have longer conversations. I wanted to share my ideas, opinions, and feelings without stopping every few seconds. So, I created a new goal for myself. Every day, I would spend more time speaking English. I started talking about different topics. I talked about my dreams. I talked about my work. I talked about my favorite movies. I talked about things happening in my life. At the beginning, it was difficult because speaking for a long time required more confidence. Sometimes I ran out of words. Sometimes my sentences were not perfect. But I continued because I knew that every difficult moment was making me stronger. I learned that the only way to improve speaking is by speaking. You cannot become a better swimmer by staying outside the pool. You have to jump in the water. English was the same. I had to use it. I had to practice it. I had to make mistakes and learn from them. During this final month, I also improved my daily routine. I created a simple system that I followed every day. In the morning, I listened to English content. I listened to conversations, podcasts, and videos. This trained my ears and helped me understand different speaking styles. During the day, I practiced thinking in English. I described things around me. I created sentences in my mind. I asked myself questions and answered them. At night, I wrote about my day in English. This routine was simple, but it created a big change because English became a part of my everyday life. It was no longer something I studied only for a short time. It became something I lived with. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when I started having conversations with other English learners and native speakers online. Before that, I was very nervous. I thought people would judge my mistakes. I thought they would notice every wrong sentence. But when I joined these conversations, I discovered something surprising. Everyone was learning. Everyone was trying. Nobody was perfect. Some people had great vocabulary but weak pronunciation. Some people spoke well but made grammar mistakes. I realized that making mistakes was normal. It was part of the process. This helped me relax and enjoy conversations more. I stopped focusing on mistakes and started focusing on communication. I remember one conversation where I had to explain my opinion about a topic. Before my journey, I would have stayed quiet. I would have said, "I don't know how to explain this." But this time, I started speaking. I made some mistakes, but I continued. I explained my ideas. The other person understood me. And after that conversation, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt proud of myself, not because my English was perfect, but because I had changed. I had become someone who was not controlled by fear anymore. That was the real victory. As the 5th month continued, I started testing myself. I watched videos without subtitles. I listened to conversations at normal speed. I tried to understand different accents. I practiced explaining difficult ideas using simple English. These exercises pushed me outside my comfort zone, but they helped me grow faster. I learned that progress happens when you challenge yourself. If you always practice things that are easy, you will improve slowly. But when you try something a little difficult, your brain starts adapting. It was during this time that I looked back at my old self and realized how much had changed. 5 months earlier, I could barely introduce myself in English. Now I could have conversations. I could understand people. I could express my thoughts. I could speak without feeling embarrassed. The journey was not magic. There was no secret shortcut. It was simply daily practice, patience, and the decision to keep going even when it was difficult. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. I decided to test my English in a situation that mattered. I had another opportunity to communicate professionally in English. This time I was nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness. Before, my fear came from thinking, I cannot do this. Now my nervousness came from excitement. I knew I had prepared. I knew I had improved. When I started speaking, something amazing happened. The words came naturally. I did not freeze. I did not panic. I listened carefully and responded confidently. I realized that the person sitting there was not the same person from 5 months ago. I had transformed. That moment taught me the most important lesson of my entire journey. English is not learned in one day. It is built through thousands of small moments. Every sentence you practice, every mistake you correct, every minute you spend listening, every time you choose to speak instead of staying silent, all of these moments create the final result. And after 5 months, I finally understood that the biggest change was not only my English, the biggest change was my confidence. I became someone who believed in himself. I became someone who knew that difficult things are possible with consistency. But my journey was not only about techniques and practice. There were lessons that changed the way I looked at learning forever. And these lessons are the most important things I want to share with you, because they can help you improve your English faster and avoid the mistakes I made at the beginning. In the next chapter, I will share the final lessons that helped me become fluent and the exact mindset that anyone can use to start their own English journey. Chapter 6. The 7 lessons that helped me become fluent in English. After 5 months of learning English, practicing every day, making mistakes, and pushing myself outside my comfort zone, I finally understood something very important. Learning English was not only about learning words, grammar, or pronunciation. It was about changing my mindset, building habits, and becoming confident enough to use the language. When I started my journey, I thought fluent speakers had some special talent that I did not have. I thought maybe they were smarter, maybe they had better teachers, or maybe they were just naturally good at languages. But after going through this journey, I realized the truth. Anyone can improve their English if they follow the right process and stay consistent. So, today, I want to share the biggest lessons that helped me transform from someone who was afraid of English into someone who could speak with confidence. The first lesson I learned was that mindset is everything. Before I improved my English, I had a negative mindset. I always told myself, my English is bad. I cannot speak English. Maybe I am not good at languages. And because I believed these things, I never gave myself a real chance. The moment I changed my thinking, everything started changing. I stopped saying, I cannot learn English. And I started saying, I am improving every day. I understood that English was not impossible. It was just a skill, and every skill can be learned with practice. If you believe you cannot do something, your brain will look for reasons to quit. But if you believe you can improve, your brain will search for solutions. The second lesson I learned was that English needs to become part of your daily life. Many people study for 1 hour and then forget about it for the rest of the day. But language does not improve like that. A language grows when you use it regularly. I started surrounding myself with English. I watched English videos. I listened to English conversations. I followed English speakers online. I changed small things in my daily routine. I tried to think in English. I tried to describe things around me in English. Even small activities helped me create a stronger connection with the language. English was no longer just a subject I studied. It became a part of my life. The third lesson was that you must speak before you feel ready. This was one of the biggest challenges for me. I wanted to wait until my English was perfect before speaking. But then I realized something. You will never feel completely ready. Confidence does not come before practice. Confidence comes because of practice. The first time you speak, you may make mistakes. Your sentences may not be perfect. You may feel nervous, but every time you speak, you become better. Every mistake gives you information. Every conversation teaches you something new. The fourth lesson was learning phrases instead of only learning individual words. In the beginning, I memorized many words, but I still could not speak naturally. Then, I started learning complete phrases and sentences. Instead of learning only the word excited, I learned sentences like, I am excited about this opportunity. Instead of only learning the word decision, I clears throat learned, I made an important decision today. This helped me understand how words are actually used in real conversations. The fifth lesson was using mistakes as a learning tool. Many learners are afraid of mistakes, but mistakes are actually a very important part of learning. Every time I made a mistake, I learned something. I wrote down my mistakes, I corrected them, I practiced the correct sentence. Slowly, my mistakes became fewer because I was learning from them. Remember, every fluent speaker was once a beginner who made thousands of mistakes. The difference is that they continued. The sixth lesson was, consistency is more powerful than motivation. Many people start learning English with excitement. They practice for a few days, then they stop because they lose motivation. But motivation comes and goes. You cannot depend only on motivation. You need a habit. I created a rule for myself. Every day I had to do something in English. Some days I practiced for 1 hour. Some days I only listened for 10 minutes, but I never completely stopped. Small actions repeated every day created a big result after 5 months. The seventh and final lesson was to enjoy the journey. Learning English should not feel like a punishment. You should enjoy discovering a new language and a new way of communicating. When I stopped worrying about being perfect and started enjoying the process, I improved much faster. I started celebrating small wins. The first time I understood a movie sentence. The first time I had a conversation without fear. The first time someone understood my English easily. These small moments gave me the motivation to continue. Looking back now, I can say that learning English changed my life. But the biggest change was not only my language ability. The biggest change was the confidence I built during the journey. I learned that I could achieve something difficult if I stayed consistent. And I want you to remember one thing. Your English journey does not need to be perfect. You do not need to know thousands of words today. You do not need perfect grammar before you start speaking. You only need to start. Take one small step every day. Listen, speak, read, write, practice, make mistakes, learn, improve. Imagine yourself 5 months from now. Imagine waking up and feeling confident because you can communicate in English. Imagine the opportunities that can come into your life because you learn this skill. That future version of you is possible, but it starts with what you do today. If I could improve my English, you can improve yours too. It does not matter where you start. It does not matter how many mistakes you make. What matters is that you continue. Because every day you practice, you are becoming better than yesterday. And one day you will look back and realize that the thing you thought was impossible became one of your greatest achievements. This is not just about learning English. This is about building confidence, creating opportunities, and becoming a better version of yourself. So, start today. Your journey to fluency begins now.